"The cavalry has arrived," Zara's voice crackled across the comm link, triumphant and giddy with relief. "Hold tight, Arra, we're coming in hot." And with a thunderous crash, the wall of the chamber exploded inward, revealing the battered but unbroken form of the Dawnbreaker hovering beyond, its weapons blazing as it poured fire into the ranks of the stunned Malaxians. The tide of battle turned in an instant, the infiltration team surging forward with renewed vigor as their comrades in arms laid down a blistering barrage of covering fire. Arra's heart soared with relief and fierce pride as she saw Jax and the others emerge from the Dawnbreaker's loading ramp, their armor scorched and battered, but their eyes alight with the fire of righteous fury. Together they carved a path through the enemy ranks, their weapons and their skill forged in the crucible of a dozen battles. And at last they reached their captured comrades, the chains that bound them, shattering under the onslaught of Marcus's plasma blade. "Took you long enough," Jack quipped, his voice weak but his spirit unbroken as Arra hauled him to his feet. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about us." Arra felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside, a release of tension and fear and the sheer, giddy relief of triumph against impossible odds. "Never," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "We never leave one of our own behind." And as they fought their way back to the waiting Dawnbreaker, their ranks swelled by the addition of their liberated friends, Arra felt a sense of invincible purpose settle over her. They had struck a blow against the heart of the Malaxian war machine, had snatched victory from the jaws of defeat through sheer grit and unbreakable loyalty. But the battle was far from over. They had their comrades back, but they were still deep in enemy territory, with the full might of the Malaxian forces bearing down upon them. The fight within the fortress had been won, but the greater struggle for the fate of Agrana's septum still hung in the balance. And as the Dawnbreaker surged forward, its engines roaring with defiant power, Arra knew that they would need every ounce of courage and skill they possessed to see their mission through to its end. But they would not falter, would not yield in the face of the coming storm. For they were Orion's finest, bound by ties of blood and honor that no force in the galaxy could break. And they would fight, to the last breath and the last bullet, to see their people safe and their enemies brought to justice. The Dawnbreaker shuddered and bucked as it tore through the atmosphere of Agrana's septum, its hull scorched and dented from the furious barrage of enemy fire. In the cockpit, Zara fought to keep the ship on course, her hands flying across the controls with a desperate, frenetic energy. Behind her, the rescued captives huddled in the main hold, their faces gaunt and haunted by the horrors they had endured. Jack, Nara, and T, the comrades Arra and her team had fought so hard to save, were battered and bruised, but alive, their spirits unbroken despite the trials they had faced. Arra moved among them, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective love as she tended to their wounds and offered what comfort she could. These were her people, her family in all but blood, and the sight of them safe and whole filled her with a joy that no words could express. But even as they tended to their own, the crew of the Dawnbreaker knew that their ordeal was far from over. The Malaxian forces were in hot pursuit, their ships and fighters swarming through the skies in a relentless tide of steel and fire. "They're gaining on us," Marcus shouted from his position at the tactical console, his voice rough with exhaustion and grim determination. "We need to get some distance, find a place to lay low and regroup." Arra nodded, her mind racing as she considered their options. They were deep in enemy territory, with precious few allies and a dwindling supply of fuel and ammunition. They needed a safe haven, a place where they could rest and heal and plan their next move. And then, like a bolt of inspiration, the answer came to her. "The Krakdi's Badlands," she said, her voice ringing with a sudden, fierce conviction. "We'll lose them in the canyons and the storm systems. It's the last place they'll think to look for us." Zara shot her a skeptical look, her brow furrowed with concern. "Arra, those canyons are a death trap. The ion storms alone could tear us apart, never mind the Malaxians." But Arra was adamant, her eyes alight with a fire that would not be denied. "It's our only chance. We have to trust in our skills and our ship. We've come too far to fail now." And so, with a grim nod of assent, Zara turned the Dawnbreaker's nose towards the seething maelstrom of the Krakdi's Badlands, the ship's engines roaring with defiant power as they plunged headlong into the heart of the storm. The pursuit was relentless, a deadly game of cat and mouse played out amidst the howling winds and crackling lightning of Agranus Septim's most unforgiving terrain. The Malaxian ships were faster and more heavily armed, their pilots driven by a fanatical devotion to their cause and a ruthless disregard for their own lives. But the crew of the Dawnbreaker were fueled by something stronger than mere fanaticism, a bond of love and loyalty that no force in the galaxy could break. And with every daring maneuver and desperate gambit, they pushed themselves and their ship to the very limits of their capabilities, their skills honed to a razor's edge by the trials they had endured. Zara flew like a woman possessed, her hands moving in a blur, as she wove the Dawnbreaker through the jagged canyons and swirling vortexes of the Badlands. Beside her, Marcus manned the weapons, his grim face lit by the fiery glow of the ship's cannons, as he poured a relentless stream of death and destruction into the pursuing enemy. And in the heart of the ship, Arra and her team tended to their wounded and their weary, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had achieved the impossible, that they had struck a blow against the heart of the enemy, and liberated their captured comrades from the very jaws of hell. It was a reunion that none of them would ever forget, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy amidst the chaos and the carnage of war. Jack, Nara, and Tiva, battered and bruised but alive, their eyes shining with gratitude and fierce, unbreakable pride. "You came for us," TV whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, as he clasped Arra's hand in his own. "You never gave up." Arra felt the tears welling up in her eyes, a surge of love and relief so powerful that it threatened to overwhelm her. "Never," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "We're family, TV. We'll always come for you." And as the Dawnbreaker streaked through the storm-racked skies of Agranus Septim, its hull battered but unbroken, its crew bloodied but unbowed, Arra felt a sense of invincible purpose settle over her. They had achieved the impossible, had snatched victory from the very jaws of defeat. And though the road ahead was long and fraught with peril, she knew that they would face it together, bound by ties of love and loyalty that no force in the galaxy could break. The rescue was complete, but the fight for Agranus Septim had only just begun. And as the Dawnbreaker vanished into the seething heart of the Cractus Badlands, Arra knew that they would need every ounce of courage and skill they possessed to see their mission through to its end. But they would not falter, would not yield in the face of the coming storm. For they were Orion's finest, the unbreakable few, and they would fight to their last breath to see their people safe and their enemies brought to justice. The Dawnbreaker shuddered as another volley of enemy fire impacted against its weakening shields. Inside the battered ship, Arra and her team were a flurry of activity, desperately trying to keep their vessel together long enough to escape the relentless Malaxian pursuit. And shields down to 20%, Zara shouted over the blaring alarms. "We can't take much more of this." Arra gritted her teeth, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. They had managed to rescue Jack, Nara, and Tiev, but now they were trapped deep within enemy territory, with the full might of the Malaxian war machine bearing down upon them. "We need to find a way to shake them off," Marcus growled, his eyes glued to the tactical display. "Make a run for the nearest jump point and get the hell out of this system." But Arra shook her head, a sudden spark of inspiration igniting in her mind. "No," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound determination. "We're not running. We're going to hit them where it hurts." The others looked at her in surprise, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. But Arra was already moving, her fingers flying across the ship's control panels, as she brought up a schematic of the Malaxian stronghold they had just escaped. "The fortress is powered by a central reactor core," she explained, her eyes blazing with intensity. "If we can get close enough to detonate a high-yield explosive, we can cripple their defenses and give ourselves a fighting chance to escape." There was a moment of stunned silence as the others digested her words. It was a desperate plan, a suicide mission that would pit them against the full might of the Malaxian forces. But as they looked around at each other, at the battered but unbroken faces of their comrades, they knew that it was the only way. Iman Jax rumbled, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "Let's give these bastards a taste of their own medicine." One by one, the others nodded their assent, their eyes alight with the same fierce determination that burned in Arra's heart. They were Orion's finest, bound by ties of blood and honor that no force in the galaxy could break. And they would fight to their last breath to see their mission through. The plan was set in motion with a flurry of activity, each member of the team falling into their assigned roles with the practiced ease of seasoned warriors. Zara worked to reinforce the Dawnbreaker's failing shields, coaxing every last ounce of power from the ship's strained systems. Rafe and Kel readied the explosives, their faces grim as they armed the deadly devices that would be their ticket to freedom. In Arra pored over the schematics of the Malaxian fortress, her mind racing as she plotted their course through the enemy's defenses. It would be a gauntlet of fire and fury, a desperate race against time, and the relentless tide of Malaxian ships that sought to destroy them. But they would not falter, would not yield in the face of the impossible odds arrayed against them. For they had already achieved the impossible, had struck a blow against the very heart of the enemy's power, and rescued their captured comrades from the jaws of hell. And as the Dawnbreaker streaked towards the looming fortress, its hull battered but unbroken, its crew bloodied but unbowed, Arra felt a sense of invincible purpose settle over her. This was their moment, their chance to strike a decisive blow against the forces of tyranny and oppression that sought to crush them underfoot. The escape plan was set, the pieces in motion. And though the road ahead was fraught with peril, Arra knew that they would face it together, bound by the unbreakable bonds of camaraderie that had seen them through the darkest of times. I hope you enjoyed the story so far. It's just part of a much longer and grander story. Please be sure to subscribe and drop a like too. The next part of the story will be in the top left once it's out.